also put it in the chat. And so typically I wouldn't do a session. I like the behind the scenes information and putting it all together, but I thought it would be a good just quick tap in to see how Mindful Moments was started and how the Mindfulness Conference was started, and then just give you some of my tips and tricks of how I try to stay mindful on a day-to-day basis. So let's go ahead and get started. We will do a meditation, but we will wait to do the meditation towards the end of the discussion. And so when we get to that point, we'll see how long we have the ability to meditate. So today we're going to talk about the balancing act of mindfulness. Mindfulness can be challenging. There are times, and I don't know how all of you feel, but I am super mindful. And then sometimes I am completely out of the mindfulness train. And those moments are when I need it the most. I'm sure everybody else feels the same way. And so as we talk about mindfulness, it's really talking about this balance. And if you have questions throughout the conversation, always feel free to put it in the chat. I'm happy to chat as we move through and take any questions or anything at all. So when we talk about balance, it's challenging, right? It's hard to constantly be at the best place at work, at home, for your health, for your family, for your relationships, for your friends. And it comes a challenge sometimes because there are moments where you can have complete balance, but then there are moments that you don't. And so what I found was for years, I always tried so hard to be completely balanced. And if you ever talk to my husband, he will tell you that I am always doing too much, whether it's cooking, I will put too much spice on the food. If it's exercising, I'm at the extreme. I'm waking up at 5 a.m. and exercising and going to the extreme. If it's relaxing, I go to the extreme, right? So everything is always too much. And so it took me a while to really recognize this and to be okay with it. And so what I found is that there are really 5 areas in my life that I'm learning to be mindfully unbalanced in. And the areas are really my family, my health, my friends, my husband, and then work. And so it's recognizing that I have these 5 areas, and maybe at times things will take a back seat. And so I don't know who else feels like this. If your life is not always on balance, but you recognize that your life is out of balance and being okay with it, right? It's not judging yourself, really, to be okay with that unbalance. And so what I'm going to ask all of you to do is we're going to do a couple of exercises today. And really the things that what I'm going to ask you first to do is write down, and this can be on a piece of paper, this can be in your phone, this can be on a Word doc, or even if you just want to think about it, that's fine. But what are your 5 areas? What are your 5 areas that are really big in your life? Maybe there's 6, maybe there's 7, maybe there's only 2, but that you sometimes feel you want to be completely balanced, or that they're like the major parts of your life. And so let's take about a minute to think about these. Okay, hopefully you're able to write some things down. And so I'm going to take you on a little journey of my life and how we got to where we are, where we have these mindful moments. And when I first started my first career out of my PhD program, as I normally do too much. And I found that the only thing I was really working on was work. That was it. Everything else was taking a back burner. And so I was probably sleeping about 2 hours a night, which was great at first because I was getting a lot done. I was being really creative. And then I realized it was not sustainable. And so what I did was I went online and did some research and really learned about different tools for sleeping. And so I found this awesome app. So for anyone that has challenges sleeping, this is a great app, and I tell everybody about it. It's called Relax and Sleep Well, and it's a freemium app where the Relax and Sleep Well with the sleep ending, um, the it's like a hypnosis. It takes you about 15 minutes to fall asleep, but that part's free. And then they have other types of one-time purchase sessions that you can do. So, for instance, I'm super afraid of flying, and so I downloaded the hypnosis for overcoming the fear of flying. And so they have all these other types of services. It's about $250, I think, for each session that you buy, and then you have it for the lifetime of Google Play or I I the iPhone, whatever that's called. So there are all these different apps, and people know about like Headspace and Calm and really the bigger apps, but this one is great. And so I always like to share it with everybody to just let you know about this app. And so this was really my first bout into mindfulness. I didn't really think much of it. But then as I came to SNHU and I started another new position, what I found was that I was, again, finding myself not sleeping and doing too much like I usually do. And what I found was that I started meditating. And when I started meditating, I realized how much it was really helping me with my attention, with my ability to calm my stress down, etc., which is, I'm guessing, why everybody else is here as well. And as a result, what I recognized was that there really was some really good research on why mindfulness is great for you. And so 10 minutes of mindfulness in just 4 weeks can help with sleep, compassion, perceived stress. So maybe you are still stressed, but it can help really bring down your stress, self-efficacy, stereotype threat, implicit bias. All of these, there's such great research showing how mindfulness can help. And so I was recognizing the importance of it. And at the same time, I went to my dean and I said, we need to really focus on mindfulness for our students. It's so helpful for them. And on the other end, from our director of wellness or health and wellness, he was reporting to the deans that the rate of depression and anxiety and ADD and eating disorders and suicidal thoughts were on the rise at SNHU, and a large increase in growth of the reported challenges that these students were facing, which is consistent across the U.S. And so my dean funded me to go to a few conferences, and during one of the conferences, it was not this Karoo mindfulness conference, but during one of the conferences, we're texting back and forth or emailing back and forth. And he said, why don't you develop a conference? And so I just like to tell the story because it was that moment on a Saturday in September of 2018 that my dean really empowered me and a group of people to develop the mindfulness conference. And so we really have him and Felix Pizzi to thank for all of this, because when you're working in a school of business, you don't necessarily always think that mindfulness connects. So we're really excited, and so I always like to tell that story because it's so interesting, but also because it helps understand how to get into mindfulness, right? Like, you can go from any avenue. You could be in business, you could be in STEM, any gamut of where you are in your discipline or in your life or work, and it can really help you. And so everybody has their own type of definition that they subscribe to for mindfulness. Mine really is living in the moment without judgment, ego, or attachment. And if you think about any moment that you get frustrated or mad or sad or upset, you can typically trace it back to one of these three areas. So whether it's judgment of yourself, you think you could have done better in something, or judging somebody else of why didn't they do better, or why did they do that action, or an ego where you think your ego is bruised, right? Someone said something to you and you're like, hey, that wasn't really nice, but really it was just maybe constructive. Or you think you should have, let's say, done I don't know, like you should have received a promotion, but somebody else received a promotion or something, right? It hits your ego. And attachment really is the idea of you connecting to an idea or thinking that something should be the way it is. So I always think of everybody and the poor students that want to go back to school, right? If they're all attached to this idea of living college on campus, which I 100% get, and that's why they're all so upset about it, because they're attached to that idea. And so it's these moments that you get, these frustrations, valid or not valid, right? I think the students are super valid that they want to have a campus experience. It's unfortunate that COVID has happened, but it's bringing all of these ideas back together, and it's being able to recognize whether you're upset due to judgment, ego, or attachment. And so what I'm going to ask everyone to do now is think about a moment recently that you were either frustrated or sad or mad, so you had some type of strong negative emotion, and think about it for about 60 seconds and see, can you trace it back to ego, attachment, or judgment? And just take a few seconds to think about that. So in the chat, and if you feel comfortable enough, please feel free to say, were you able to or not, right? Maybe you weren't, and maybe you realized that it was something else, right? And that's very valid. That's totally fine. I'm just wondering, right? Like, can you usually bring it back to one of those three? Okay, awesome. Not awesome. I'm sorry you had to experience those negative emotions, but interesting. Yeah, and sometimes it's a great point, Hannah. Sometimes it is a mixture of everything, right? It's that your ego is bruised because you had an attachment to something, and so you judge that moment in time, right? And so it's just interesting. So when we go through the meditation, I'm going to try to get you to recognize those emotions as well. Yeah. And so it's hard though, and in the fact that you all just were able to identify the different labels of the emotions that you felt is pretty huge, right? And so anytime I get upset, I always think about this. I'm like, what is this hurting, right? Is it my ego? Is it my attachment? Or is it judgment? And if I can at least put a label on it, it doesn't necessarily get rid of that feeling or that negative emotion, but at least it makes me more aware, right, of what's happening. Sure. So my example of attachment, or an example of attachment is, let's say you're really excited to go back to work, right? We're all at home right now. We're at home, working from home. We've been doing this since March, and so on Fridays, President LeBlanc comes out and explains to us reasons why we have to continue to extend the work from home order. And so you get really upset. You're like, but I just want to go back to work, right? It's not that you're, and so you get upset. And so that attachment to going back to work, right? And so that's that attachment, just or attached to a thing, right? So if you want to, my dad always gives the example of when I was 16, I really wanted this car. And he's like, you don't have a driver's license. Why do you want this car? But I was so attached to that car, and I was so bummed that they wouldn't buy me a car. Um, and so that's that attachment to it, like a material good, right? That always happens too, of course. And so what I'm going to ask you to do, and this might be a little harder, right? Because it's not a specific experience, but I'm going to ask you to think about situations that trigger your ego, right? Like what are some things that really trigger your ego? So for me, as an example, when people tell me I can't do something, I'm like, really? Watch me, right? And that's my ego saying, really watch me. But think about just to yourself for a few seconds. What are some things that really trigger your ego to make you, and sometimes it's good, right? Because then I will go do it. But things that just make you really frustrated when someone really goes after your ego that you don't know that they're going after. So let's take about 30 seconds to think about that. And the next one, we're going to talk about judgment. So, what are situations that trigger your judgment, right? That make you really judgmental, either to yourself or to others. So, I'll give you my example. When people are mean, nothing makes me judge them more. And so I get so upset when people are mean, whether to me or to others. And this is why I actually put this quote up, because I have to remind myself constantly, be indifferent towards those that are wicked or mean, right? Like wicked is a little bit of a strong word. But think about things that get you and why you start judging, right? Like what are those things that make you judge? And again, let's take about 30 seconds just to think about some of these items. Okay, and then finally, we're just going to think about attachments. So, what are some things, some situations that really trigger your attachment? Whether it's to maybe it's a material good, maybe it's an idea, something that you really attach to. So, for me, I'll give you my example. I'm attached to teaching students. Face to face or in a model where I like to have conversations with them. And I am really attached to that, and I recognize that I'm attached to that. But what are some of these areas that you have these attachments that you can think of? Again, let's do another 30 seconds of writing some of these down, or at least just reflecting on them. And so you have this list or these reflections that you just went through, and so some of them they're all warranted. There's a reason why you have an attachment or ego or judgment to all of them, but it's good now that you recognize that you have them, right? And that's where that mindfulness comes in. That you're being mindful now of these triggers, right, that you have within yourself, and so it's that living in the moment. So sometimes it just takes a few seconds for you to realize that you have these moments, or these are the things that kind of get you frustrated. And everybody has different ones, but it's nice to sometimes bring those up to the surface to help you be able to move on. Because when you have these thoughts in your head, sometimes it's hard to have to move forward with positive thinking, right? And to be able to move on with your day, or your mind is so clouded by this information. So if you can bring it up, then you realize that it's easier to move forward with your day, or whatever is happening. So I love this quote by Rumi. He says, "Maybe you are searching among the branches for what only appears in the roots." And so sometimes we're looking outward, but really, if you look inward, that's really what can help you with moving forward in your life. So I'm going to now invite all of you to take a few minutes to meditate with me. I appreciate you listening and chatting and thinking and reflecting. I hope this was a helpful session, and we'll go through this meditation, and the idea is really to label your feelings. And so when we go through, what I'm going to invite you to do is, when a thought comes up, just put a feeling attached to it. So whether you have that attachment, whether you're frustrated, you're happy, you're joyful, you're sad, just try to take a second to put some type of feeling that is attached to the thought, okay? So let's take one deep breath in through our nose, and then exhale through our mouth. Take another inhale through our nose. And on the next exhale, if you want to slowly flutter your eyes closed. You can also have a soft gaze to the ground. That is totally fine if you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes. And I'm guessing people are sitting in their chairs. If you are, I would say have just a straight back, but not too firm, right? Make sure you're relaxed. If your feet can hit the floor, that's wonderful. And then take a few seconds to just settle into your breath. And now I'm going to invite you to take one deep breath in. And as you do, just try to realize where your breath is the strongest, because we will be focusing our attention on that area. Some people say it's their breath is the strongest in their nose. Some people say in their throat, in their chest. Some people even say in the bottom of their belly. Doesn't matter where it is. But as you're breathing, just try to recognize where your breath is the strongest. And then start focusing your attention on that spot. And as you're focusing on your breath, if any emotions or thoughts come to your mind, just try to put some type of emotion, a label of that emotion. So it could be happy, sad, frustrated, mad, and then put the label on it. And if you can, try to very gently and mindfully and very non-judgmentally let go of that thought and bring your attention back to your breath. Now slowly start feeling the bottoms of your feet against your shoes or the floor. Maybe you feel the seat that you're sitting in. Maybe start wiggling your fingers. And then take one deep breath in. And as you exhale, if you want to slowly open your eyes. I know that was a really short meditation, but I want to be mindful of your time. My clock on my computer says 12:29, which is different than my phone. But thank you all for joining today. I hope it was helpful. I hope there was you got some good pointers that you can use for the rest of your day and the rest of the week even.